I want to talk about the absolute behemoth, not just of the defense industry, but one of the hottest stocks, if not the hottest stock on planet Earth. Jim Cramer comes in this week. He says, Palantir is undervalued, baby. Palantir absolute to the moon. We've got another tweet here from, I'm not even going to read this dude's username. Palantir crosses 600 price to earnings multiple. It has earned almost $500 billion market cap on $500 million yearly net income. These guys, you can't be short Palantir, Ben. There are no shorts left.
Sometimes you got to do the opposite of what Jim Cramer says.
Absolutely. So reverse Cramer is the top in. Well, let's talk about that because it is very hard right now to find a Palantir skeptic. That said, I am very excited to welcome to the program. We found just such a person, and it's maybe not for the reasons you'd expect. Excited, Brad Glasco. U.S. Air Force veteran, 35 years of federal service on both the military and civilian side. He's lots of and continued service in the private sector. Brad had a fascinating post and argument this week that ties into exactly what we were just talking about, Ben, around vendor lock. Brad, thanks so much for joining us on the Steam Zone. It's great to have you, sir.
Hey, thanks so much, Noah. I really do appreciate it. Can you hear me okay?
We got you loud and clear, sir.
Awesome.
Hey, so Brad, lay it out for us. You know, in this, folks are frothing at the mouth to buy more Palantir. They're slamming the buy button. Talk us through your argument here. What is giving you pause?
Well, to be quite honest with you, it gives me a lot of pause. And as you said, I've been in this industry for about 35 years. I'm an engineer by trade. And I've been involved in numerous very large Department of Defense programs. And I'm not a real big fan of how, the Department of Defense does technologies. A lot of times, we do things backwards and we don't think things out very well. And I kind of feel that we're going down the same pathway here as well. Palantir, I'm not against Palantir at all. I think that for the application of what you purchase it for, it's a great capability. But how we're going all in with this technology, specifically around the Air Force and in the Navy and the Marine Corps and Army, I think that we're putting ourselves a little bit at risk. They're viewing it as a one-size-fits-all kind of tool, something that's going to be the be-all, end-all solution that's going to fix all of our mission ailments. And that's not necessarily the case. And what we're actually finding, from a practical application is that the more that we go in with this capability, the more segmented our mission gets because we don't actually have access to the data that we need to do our jobs. There are so many legacy platforms and applications that we're supposed to integrate with, but no one's looking at the fact that we're not dissecting the mission processes and the jobs that the airmen are doing every day. All we want to do is siphon up all the data and put it into Palantir. Well, then what? What's next? Where do we go from there?
Taking a step back, can you just, for the listeners who don't know how all this government contracting works, what was this big agreement? And just take us through what your interpretation of it is, just overall, so we understand how it works.
So the overall aspect, if anybody's been in, defense contracting for very long, it takes 3 to 4 to 5 years to actually pursue a very large enterprise deal. Once the enterprise deal is won, regardless of what the technology is, it takes 1.5 to 2 years to 3 years to even begin implementation. And before you actually get the implementation completed, because everything is so complex, sometimes it can be 10 years. We've got programs that have been purchased that are going on 13 years. They've spent billions of dollars, and we haven't even rolled out the first capability to the user yet. So I see us going in and making a big, what I would call a big bet, a $10 billion contract by the Army. And I like the fact that they're consolidating contracts. They're bringing efficiencies to procurement, and we're bringing in cost savings for the taxpayers. But at what cost is it in the long run? Because again, you got to think about it. They're not removing the bureaucracy. They're not streamlining how we implement the capabilities. They're just saying we're going to purchase this capability for all intents and purposes almost on a sole source basis. There wasn't a competitive procurement for this. They awarded it to Palantir and Palantir only, and they're locked in. I've been selling technology to the government for at least 20 years now, and I was a 15-year consumer of it prior to that. And, from the confines of that, every time you talk to someone about some type of technology, it's always about vendor lock. Well, we can't get vendor lock. Let's step back. We can't get vendor lock. Well, this is this perfect example of vendor lock. It's what it is.
They've agreed to this 10-year, $10 billion contract. The Air Force is definitely going to spend that $10 billion, or they have to, it's like task orders that they can order against it.
It's the Army and
the Army. Yep.
It's task orders. It's IDIQ style of contract. It's, for all intents and purposes, like an enterprise license agreement. They don't shell out the $1 billion, but if you look at the history of the purchases and you look at how much has been spent thus far with Palantir, they'll go through that $10 billion pretty quick.
Brad, so here's I think, we're talking today about some hard questions and some hard choices. And one of the things that you hear from the venture financing community all the time is, hey, look, we've showed up, we've basically allowed the Department of Defense to outsource a lot of their research and development, their R&D, to the private sector. And the way that we've done that is we, the venture community, have subsidized that work. We've placed bets on companies. We've spent money ahead of the government to help mature those companies and those capabilities. That only works if the government then, what they would call, picks some winners, as you said, makes big bets, pushes their chips all in on one of those companies, right? So that they can get what they would venture returns. They're not looking for 6 companies that each make, 10 to 100 million. They want a couple of big winners that can make, and again, that's not what the American taxpayer may say. That's what the venture community is saying. So in this case, right, you've got, now Palantir is a public company, but I think there's a lot of folks on the venture side who would say we actually need more of this consolidation of picking a provider and a capability. How do you weigh that? How does that consideration play for you, vice the concerns of the American taxpayer and the warfighter? Is there any alignment there at all?
Well, there is. And you got to look at it from an innovative perspective. And I agree with a lot of the things that are going on today. It's just that, it's my concerns around where this is headed and how the decisions are being made. They don't necessarily align with historical norms. The venture capitalists and the organizations that are investing in these companies that are creating new tech, they're getting noticed and they're getting out there in prime time. But actually, activities like this will effectively push some of these smaller players out. If you think about it, they're not going to be given the opportunity because the Department of Defense, and I'll say it from a broader context, not specifically picking on the Army or any specific entity, but the Department of Defense looks like they're doubling down that our analytic capability is going to be no one but Palantir.
So that's basically Palantir is crowding out kind of the other newcomers is the reason.
Yes, absolutely.
Thanks for taking us through your perspective. Easy to read a top line head number, harder to think about kind of what the details are.
So Brad, maybe walk us through, like, based on where we are today. I think your point is clear. Hey, we need to take a step back. We need to ask some questions. What options are available, do you think, to the government at this point? What are the different paths that the Army or that big DoD could pursue at this point?
Well, if I'm not going to sit here and say that the Department of Defense can build a better widget than Palantir can. I'm not going to state that. But I'm also not going to ignore the fact that the Department of Defense already owns a lot of the tools in their arsenal to create the capability that Palantir is going to provide them in a black box. And it's comprised of multiple different partners that the Department of Defense has made a significant investment in, that all they have to do is knit the capability together with COTS-based products, not GOTS, but COTS-based products that could give them a similar type of functionality. And they would not be cemented into a singular solution provider that is already known to have extremely high prices, extremely high consulting costs. And, for all intents and purposes, if you decided that you wanted to pull one of those other COTS partners out, there are other partners at play that could replace that functionality, but you can't do that with a single player. You can't do that with a single solution. You're locked There's no way to easily extract yourself. There's no easy way to extract your data because it's intertwined within that data backbone and the ontology so tightly that in order for them to extract, it's going to cost probably more than what they're spending today.
So commercial off the shelf versus government off the shelf, using other technologies, stitching them together to give the government a bit more control. It's thought-provoking stuff, Brad. I imagine you've, since putting this out there, you've probably gotten some people agreeing with you vehemently and a lot of people sniping at you and very upset with the take. I think, look, there is the important thing is that these conversations need to be had out in the open, that we understand the trade-offs and that the decisions are made in if not a transparent way during the decision-making process, that the logic and the trade-offs are accurately communicated, because we need to understand what we're getting here as American taxpayers.
Absolutely, and as I share with you today, it's really not coming from the perspective of I'm for or against. I have an opinion, but what gets me going down this pathway is asking the why. And when I can't get a solid answer back of explaining the why that makes sense, that makes me begin to have concerns.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I appreciate you voicing those concerns, and we appreciate you putting them out there. Brad, thank you so much for spending a few minutes with us here, and we hope hope to have you back again soon.
Hey, appreciate it, Noah. Thanks, Ben. Have a great night.
Take care, Brad.
Thanks for coming.